Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today, on hand for review, we have the PowerColor RX 5700 XT Liquid Devil. And yeah, I know, it's another 5700 XT review, and I said I'd stop doing those about half a dozen 5700 XT reviews ago. But the PowerColor Red Devil was one of the first, in fact it was actually the second, custom AIB 5700 XT card that I reviewed, and to this day, it's still one of the best. So when PowerColor approached me to check out their new special liquid-cooled model, I jumped at the opportunity. Appropriately named Liquid Devil, this is the first and only 5700 XT to come with a pre-installed water block, and that's kind of a big deal for a few reasons. Firstly, it means you don't have to mess around with installing the block yourself because, well, obviously it's already pre-installed, and the installation of the block can be quite nerve-wracking, as you not only have to get this thing on there without damaging the graphics card, but you also have to take off the factory air cooler, and some of those can be a bit tricky to remove. Of course, for experienced users, not really a problem, but for those learning the ins and outs of liquid cooling, it, as I said, can be a bit nerve-wracking. The other big advantage is the warranty. For those of you mounting a water block to a graphics card, you are effectively voiding your warranty. I know a lot of people keep their factory cooler for warranty purposes, though in some regions that little void sticker thing is valid, so that can be a bit tricky when going through the warranty process if that has a screwdriver head through it. But anyway, in the case of the Liquid Devil, you don't have to worry about any of that nonsense. It comes with a 3-year warranty, and of course the block is pre-installed, so you're just ready to go. Having said all that, it's not cheap. A high-quality air-cooled 5700 XT will set you back around $440 to $450 US, and in fact you'll pay $440 for the Red Devil. The Liquid Devil, on the other hand, well, it costs $600, but it's not as bad as it sounds initially. You're looking at having to spend at least $150 US on a 5700 XT water block, so that takes the cost of a base model 5700 XT with the block up to $550 US. And that doesn't include pre-installation or a 3-year warranty. Moreover, you'd be using a reference PCB, which is fine, but the Liquid Devil is better. Another big plus here is the binning process. PowerColor claim they are selectively picking the best 5700 XT silicon for the Liquid Devil line, which ensures maximum overclocking headroom and the lowest operating temperatures. So keeping all that in mind, the price doesn't seem all that bad, though it's hard to say just how much sense it makes spending $600 US on a 5700 XT when RTX 2070 Super graphics cards start at $500, and you can purchase something like the EVGA RTX 2070 Super XE Hybrid Gaming, a 120mm AIO model, for just $570. Anyway, we'll move past that for a moment and check out the Liquid Devil in a bit more detail. Okay, so the card is fairly compact. It measures just 240mm long, which is quite short for a 5700 XT. It stands 162mm tall and measures 42mm thick. Actually, it's really only about 25mm thick, but because PowerColor hasn't included a single slot I/O bracket, it is technically a dual slot card. Perhaps a bit of an oversight there. You could replace the bracket if you wanted, as the I/O is configured to a single slot and it's a pretty standard setup, 1 HDMI output and 3 display ports. Now, the all-important water block. It's been designed and built by EK. It covers the entire PCB and it's been custom built to cool all the critical components on the Liquid Devil's PCB, which obviously includes the GPU, VRM and GDDR6 memory, and coming in contact with all these components is a nickel-plated copper base. Then we have a clear acrylic cover which features a few neat-looking aluminium trimmings, and then setting it all off is a series of embedded RGB LEDs, fully controllable via the Devil Zone software. Around at the back of the card, there's a full-size aluminium backplate which looks quite nice and keeps the theme going from the front side of the card. Sadly, it's not connected to the PCB using any thermal pads, but given how cool this thing should run, it's probably going to be a non-issue. Found at the top of the card are a pair of 8-pin PCIe power connectors, and at the opposite end a small switch that lets you switch between 2 BIOS modes. By default, the card is set to the Unleash mode, and this enables a peak GPU power of 270 watts, and then there's an OC BIOS which limits this to 230 watts. By default, the card targets a maximum boost clock of 2070 MHz, which is the highest we've seen from a 5700 XT graphics card. The Red Devil, for example, targeted 2010 MHz. So out of the box performance should be quite strong, but I'm more interested in seeing how far we can push this thing when manually overclocking it, so let's get to that. For testing, I've hooked up the Liquid Devil directly to the EK Kit Classic RGB P240, and I'm not using the CPU block, so just the graphics card is being cooled by this kit. For those unaware, this kit packs a 240mm rad, which measures 40mm wide, and comes with a pair of EK Vidar, I think I pronounced that right, sorry if I didn't, 120mm fans. For testing, I started, as we often do, by firing up F1 2019 and running on a loop for an hour, after which time the Liquid Devil peaked at just 55 degrees in a 21 degree room, which makes it about 13 degrees cooler than the Red Devil. Under these conditions, the Red Devil averaged an operating frequency of 1980 MHz, while the Liquid Devil averaged 2020 MHz, which is the highest out-of-the-box frequency we've seen from a 5700 XT. Then for overclocking, I used the Power Tool mod to remove AMD's limits. This allowed me to set a core frequency of 2250 MHz using 1.3 volts with an 80% power limit. This was as far as I could push the Liquid Devil while maintaining 100% stability. And with these settings, the Liquid Devil averaged an operating clock speed of 2150 MHz, with the GPU peaking at just 56 degrees, so a very impressive result indeed. Okay, so let's have a quick look at some benchmark graphs. As usual, we're testing with our Core i9 9900K GPU test rig. The CPU has been overclocked to 5GHz, and we have 16GB of DDR4 3400 memory. For this testing, I'm using the Adrenaline 2019 version, as I had a few issues with the 2020 version using the Liquid Devil. Apparently it is supposed to work, but for whatever reason I was stuck with a core frequency of 300 MHz, and there were a few other gremlins, so perhaps a few issues with that driver that AMD need to sort out. A bit disappointing, but anyway, testing with the 2019 Adrenaline version worked perfectly fine. As usual, for these graphics card reviews, we won't look at too many games, there's really no need. So this time we're just going to look at two titles, Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I've also included the 2060 Super, 2070 Super and 2080 Super for reference, as well as pretty much every other 5700 XT on the market. Out of the box, the Liquid Devil was just 1 FPS slower than the 2070 Super and Assassin's Creed Odyssey, though with stronger 1% low performance, you could argue it offered the superior gaming experience, but really either way performance was much the same. When compared to the air-cooled 5700 XTs, you're looking at about a 2 FPS increase out of the box, so not exactly earth-shattering gains. Manually overclocked, we managed to boost performance by a further 7%, pretty small gains really, but this was enough to place the Liquid Devil in striking range of a stock 2080 Super. Here the 2080 Super was 5% faster, but it cost 17% more, so you'd need to overclock the GeForce graphics card for it to match the Liquid Devil's cost per frame, at least in this title. The margins in Shadow of the Tomb Raider are really very similar to what we saw in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, though the 2080 Super does a little better here. Still, overclocked, the Liquid Devil was faster than a stock 2070 Super, but of course it's not actually going to be better in terms of value. Looking at GPU power consumption and hardware info, we see that the Liquid Devil is a bit of a power pig, but of course with the water block it can afford to be. Here we're looking at a 20% increase in power usage over the Red Devil, for what amounts to a 4 to 5% increase in FPS performance. Now, when measuring total power draw from the wall, we do see a slight increase over the Red Devil for the Liquid Devil, and that's largely down to the fact that the pump is now included in that figure. So the total system consumption with the Liquid Devil is about 25% higher than the Red Devil, so not too much of an increase there. Okay, so here's a look at the all-important GPU temperatures, and as you can see, the Liquid Devil ran 10 degrees cooler than the best air-cooled 5700 XT that we've tested to date. It's also 13 degrees cooler than the Red Devil. Given the card is also sucking down more power than any of these air-cooled versions, that is a very impressive result. Overclocking did slightly raise the fan speed, and we'll look at operating volume in a moment, but even here we still saw a peak of just 57 degrees. The VRM temperatures don't really matter given how low they are on a decent air-cooled model. The Liquid Devil peaked at just 60 degrees out of the box, and then 62 degrees once overclocked, so well within safe limits. And the same really also applies to the GDDR6 memory. This stuff's not really stable much above 950 MHz. We were seeing artifacts at 1000 MHz for example, so a peak operating temperature of 59 degrees at 950 MHz is very low. And the best air-cooled models ran at over 70 degrees with the memory at 875 MHz, so yeah, a great result here for the Liquid Devil. The operating volume will naturally vary depending on your setup, so take these figures with a grain of salt, but the point is, custom liquid cooling should be a lot quieter, and this is of course one of the benefits of going down this path. Using a pair of 120mm fans spinning at between 1000 and 1400 RPM, the Liquid Devil was very cool and quiet. Obviously, this isn't the type of product you buy if you're at all concerned about things like cost per frame, though relative to something like a GeForce RTX 2080 Super, it's actually not too bad in terms of value, but we're probably setting the bar a bit too low there. Compared to other air-cooled 5700 XTs, the value aspect isn't great. You're paying about $200 US more, so about 50% more, and you're getting a few extra frames. Of course, the real draw card here are the operating temperatures and the really low operating volume, though again, that will depend on your setup. Speaking of which, I'm not going to factor in the cost of all the accompanying bits like the radiators, pump and so on, because the Liquid Devil is meant for gamers who already have all of that, or at the very least, we're planning on going down the custom liquid cooling path anyway. As a side note, EK offers a number of really nice liquid cooling kits for beginners and experienced users, and the 5700 XT Liquid Devil complements them very nicely. The kit we used costs $290 US, and it includes a CPU block, which is compatible with all Intel platforms, as well as AMD's AM4 socket. But I will just note, if you were to use this cooling kit with both a CPU and the Liquid Devil, I'd probably look to include a second radiator. Really, for those of you wanting to create your own custom loop, the Liquid Devil is a great option as you're not at risk of voiding your warranty. You don't have to mess around with installing the block, which is without question the most tricky part, and you're getting top shelf silicon. Although the do-it-yourself approach might save you $50, I feel the saving just isn't worth the risk. And apparently the Liquid Devil has been selling really well for PowerColor, despite being a bit of a niche product. And I'd say that's because there are very few alternatives for those after a graphics card with a pre-installed block. There are no other 5700 XT options, and as far as I'm aware, no 2070 Super options either. I'm sure we'll see some comments complaining about the price, but really, I feel for this kind of product, it is very reasonable. Personally, I also think it's great that PowerColor are catering to those after a liquid-cooled option. After all, they already offer one of the absolute best entry-level air-cooled models with the Red Dragon, and then one of the best performance air-cooled models with the Red Devil. So, yeah, I feel like there's no harm in offering the Liquid Devil. All in all, a great product with no real drawbacks, other than the price, which we've already touched on. And I think the price is very reasonable for what you're getting. And if I had a custom loop with, I don't know, something like a GTX 1070, for example, then I'd certainly be putting my hand up for a Liquid Devil. I think that'd be a pretty suitable upgrade in that scenario. And that is going to do it for this one. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to do those YouTube-y things to show that you liked the video. You can subscribe for more content. And if you appreciate the work we do at Unboxed and you want to get more involved with the channel, then head over to our Patreon page. There's a few different tiers there with some cool perks. And we've also got our merch. Happy unboxing. This is only going to be available for not sure how long, a week? Not sure. Tim will know on that one. I might have to ask him. But anyway, it is a limited edition thing. It will be gone after Christmas. So if you want one, grab one now. There's some other cool stuff over at our merch store. But anyway, thank you for watching. I'm your host, Steve, and I'll see you again next time.